This is the amazing audience for today's speech. Wanted to thank everyone for taking the time to listen to my speech about the SEC microculture. We'll go ahead and get started here. So let me put you in a situation. So imagine that it's, midday on Saturday and you're at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. It's game day. We're playing LSU. Okay, we're going to win. But, you look out, this is your first game that you've been to, and you see all these people in orange and white, and then you see a whole nother sea of people in purple and gold. Sorry for that back there. But, to someone that hasn't been to a game before, this sea of people might just look like a random group of crazy people getting together to watch the people throw a ball around. But to people who have been in the South for a long time, such as myself, we know that there is a deeply rooted tradition behind this. And this is actually a very effective way by which they communicate their regional identity and pride in their state or their university. So, from studying the frameworks of communication in this class, it has helped me understand a little bit more about why people in football and in the surrounding areas of football, like the fans, the people involved in managing the teams and the players, why they represent their colors and their team so proudly. So it's actually not just representing the team that's playing out on the field. It's a little bit more than that. Instead, for Tennessee, with their national anthem being, or not their national anthem, their team song being Rocky Top, it's about, the struggles and the joys of living in Tennessee and all the opportunity that it can bring. And for, Alabama, they have the elephant and Roll Tide, and they have a lot of pride in what they do. So one of the main ways in which they communicate their regional identity and their pride is through verbal and in-group communication. So by verbal communication, I'm talking about, expressing what they're saying through chants or having certain slang words that only people in the in-group, as we call it, which is just people inside the culture that understand the meanings of these everyday slang words, they use these to communicate their regional pride. So for example, if you go to Alabama and you say Roll Tide to someone, they understand what you're saying and they probably agree with you. However, if you go to somewhere that's an out group of this culture, such as the University of Tennessee at Knoxville, you say Roll Tide, you're going to get booed, and probably a little bit more than that, But that distinction is important for defining these different cultures. So these slang words, they help dictate who's in the in group and who's in the out group, as well as the colors they represent, as well as the way they talk about their team, and it really represents a big sense of regional identity. And actually, there was a study conducted on this. So Dr. Andrew Billings explains that these specific team greetings function as linguistic shibboleths, essentially meaning that they're verbal handshakes. So just acknowledging to one another that they are, part of the in-group and part of the people that understand the culture and are a part of it as well. So not only language is used to communicate the regional identity and the culture, but also they use symbols and rituals. For example, let's go back to October 2022, where Tennessee, famously defeated Alabama by 1 field goal. At the end of the game, the fans ended up storming the field. People were all in a cahoot about this win, and they ended up, uprooting the goalpost and taking it down to the Tennessee River. And for someone just watching the game, just pitching in at the end, it might have looked very random and looked like it didn't mean anything. However, for people that are fans of Tennessee football, as myself, we realize that it has a much deeper meaning than that. It was basically uprooting that 15-year loss streak that Tennessee had to Alabama and just tossing it in the river, letting it go, and starting afresh. You know, even though next season they didn't do much better, but you know, essentially they're just uprooting that past and you know, passing it away. That was their way of communicating to other people outside of the in group that, hey, you know, we're Tennessee, you know, we're a powerful force in and outside of football, and we have a lot of pride in our area. But you know, this was also examined academically, according to a 22 report by the Academics College football correspondent David Euban. Carrying the goalposts to the river was a highly symbolic act of catharsis. So, essentially, using this in-group and out-group communication, you know, distinguish who is in support of Tennessee and who's a part of that culture, and in defining that regional identity and pride, and who is not. So I would like to thank you all for listening to my speech about how verbal, ritualistic, symbolic, and in-group communication all help define regional identity and a sense of pride through the SEC microculture and deeper traditions of the South. Thank you.
Make sure I'm on the video because I don't know if I got me on the first part.